Welcome to the Intimate Marriage Podcast, where I teach educated, successful couples how to have incredible, passionate relationships so that you can stop compromising and start feeling fully alive in your relationship. I'm Alexandra Stockwell, aka the Intimacy Doctor. I'm a physician, a relationship and intimacy coach, and I'm an intimate marriage expert. My husband and I have been married for 26 years. We have 4 children and full professional lives, and we've created an amazing marriage. I've shown hundreds of couples how to do so as well. So if you want to deepen your understanding of your own relationship and learn to access new heights of emotional, sensual, and erotic intimacy, you're in the right place. I will show you how. Now, let's dive in. Have you or your spouse navigated the terminal illness of a parent? Today's episode is really important, really significant. It is not particularly flirtatious or juicy in that way, but it absolutely is all about one component of intimacy, which quite frankly, I've never heard people talk about. I've never heard a podcast on this. It just doesn't come up, but it is so important. And if you or your spouse have navigated through the terminal illness of one of your parents, then you know how important this is. And if you haven't, please listen, because I'm going to give you some ideas about how to set yourself up so that if you ever find yourself in this situation, you will be more prepared than almost everybody is. Now, before we go into that, I want to share one of the reviews that I found on iTunes, Apple Podcast. It's from Moxie18. And Moxie says, Alexandra's voice is one that needs to be heard. She guides listeners in their relationship journeys with grace, kindness, intelligence, and love. This podcast is amazing and well worth listening to. Version 2.0 is even more focused and applicable. Well, Moxie, thank you so much. And if you're here listening, I sure hope that you agree with Moxie. And please go ahead and leave a rating and a review wherever you're listening to podcasts. And if you're listening on YouTube, go ahead and press the subscribe button so that I can share more of what I have to say and you can take it, use what appeals to you, implement it, and up-level your relationship in magnificent ways. And honestly, navigating through the terminal illness of a parent is one such way that you can either create disconnection in the moment and in a way that lasts a long time, or you can create connection. Is it a time that's going to lead to juicy, expansive sensuality? Maybe, probably not. But is it going to deepen your connection and allow for a richer, soulful intimacy once you transition to the next phase of your lives? Yes, I think it can. So I'm recording this actually. Just a minute, I need a break. So I'm recording this actually shortly before Valentine's Day. I know when you listen, Valentine's Day 2023 will have passed. However, it's relevant. It's relevant today because one of my good friends, my operations manager who touches everything in my business that you encounter and benefit from, she's in a really deep phase of life right now. Her very beloved father has a terminal cancer diagnosis, and for the past 2 months, there was the possibility of his passing at any moment. He's actually doing better right now, but the end the end isn't determined, but it isn't so far away, and she and her family know that, and she's taken many trips to be with him for extended periods. As I'm recording, she's at home, and she said to me, "It's really hard on a marriage. Of course, it's hard on her daughter's heart. It's hard on the family going through this, but it is also really hard on the marriage." And honestly, she didn't even need to say much more than that because I definitely understand that. In 2000, when I was an intern at UMass Worcester, my father was terminal in New York State. Now, in that particular situation, I knew what his symptoms were, and because I was a family physician in training, I also knew what his diagnosis likely was. My father had many remarkable qualities, and one of them, which was sometimes remarkable and sometimes to his detriment, he was stubborn and independent. And so he, well, that's a whole other story I'm not going to get into. But the point is that, at least consciously, he and his wife did not know he was dying, and I knew he probably was. That was a very unique circumstance. And so when he was admitted to the hospital, I dropped everything to go be there because, rightly so, I knew it was a time to say goodbye. But the point is that I had about, I think, 2 or 3 months where this wasn't spoken about. Nobody understood. My brother, who would have been somebody that I would have discussed this with at the time, was living in Dharamsala, northern India, on the border with Nepal. This was when I guess there was internet, but anyway, we didn't have much contact. And so I was navigating this by myself, updating my husband, but he was working super hard as a resident. And so I felt very alone in this experience. And my relationship with my father was complicated, which created extra challenges in this situation. I really wanted to connect with him, resolve and heal things, feeling the urgency that this was my last opportunity. And I actually went and visited him and was able to have such a beautiful healing visit that I knew had this greater context that he, at least consciously, did not know about. Then 2 years later, in 2002, my mother, who had been diagnosed with breast cancer 5 years before, had treatment, went into remission, and then 2 years later, so 3 years before this, had it return. And she also made various decisions that made it likely that the cancer was going to spread. And one of the things that I felt so powerless about was that she was making decisions based on advice that I wouldn't have actually followed, but it was her decision. She got to choose. And she wanted to just be with my brother and me, so she was at home, and for a good 2 months, well, he lived with her for 3 months, and for about 2 months, I spent most of my time there. I would drive home to take a shower and cook a bunch of meals, hug my dear, dear children, who at the time were 4 and 6 years old, and then head back out to be with my mother and my brother. And one of the things that I found profoundly challenging during that time in addition to not knowing how to plan, I never knew if this was the last week or we were going to go on in this kind of logistically challenging limbo, and it would be another 9 months until my mother passed. It would probably be less, but I really didn't know. And of course, I didn't want to rush it. But that not knowing and not really being able to plan with a husband and his work schedule and my children and their ride to school and home and just all of the things. In fact, one of the times, it was actually when a doctor told my mother that she had about 6 weeks left. On my ride home, my husband called to tell me that Josephine, our daughter, had lost her first tooth. And so part of the challenge of that time was juxtaposing everything that was going on inside me as I lost or was in the process of losing my dear beloved mother. My relationship with my mother was extraordinary. Complicated, sure, but extraordinary and good. And so on the one hand, I was facing her imminent death. And on the other, my daughter was losing her tooth and excited about all of the fun things in first grade. And my son was starting kindergarten. And I just didn't want to be this cold blanket, this wet blanket, this unresponsive mother at this important time in their lives. And yet I just felt like there was a tug of war going on inside me, and I didn't want either side to win and I didn't want either side to lose. Anyway, I'm just trying to convey how the emotional landscape in the context of family life, of marriage, of the uncertainty of what the loss is going to mean, it can have so many different flavors. And in both cases, when my father was dying and died, and when my mother was dying and died, I think one of the things that was most surprising was how lonely I felt within my marriage. Because my husband understood my relationship with my father and had his version of something similar with him. And my husband knew how close I was with my mother and how deeply we loved one another. And my husband loved my mother so deeply, and she loved him. And so, having gone through marriage together, having gone through all kinds of things, our wedding, having gone through our wedding together in the familial context, after just going through so many different things and learning how to share and be close with one another, it kind of took me off guard how I felt like I was living somewhere with a moat around me, and my husband didn't know how to find the drawbridge and come join me in this experience. And I also felt like he didn't even realize how wide that moat was, how far away he was, how alone I felt navigating these experiences. And he didn't even seem to have his attention on trying to find me and connect with me. Now, 23 and 21 years later, I view it very differently, but I'm describing how it was for me. And in a way, this is very relevant because my friend whom I referred to earlier, she was telling me how she thinks about her father all the time, even though he's an airplane ride away, or when he's an airplane ride away, he lives in a different state than she does. She thinks about him all the time when she is awake, when her conscious mind is active, maybe not front and center, but always in the front of her mind. is her father and where he is and if he's in pain and how she can be oriented to him in this last phase of his beautiful life. Whereas her husband, he is sad. He is sorry. This is definitely a loss for him, but he has the capacity to just put it out of his mind. And when they go out to dinner with friends, he's not thinking about it. He is in the present moment, focused on what is going on. And this is the kind of thing that I don't actually know if she feels this way, so I'm not going to generalize. But from my perspective, this is one of the things that creates a very unique loneliness, specifically when there is closeness, connection. Your spouse is someone who is your best friend, or in any case, someone that you share important things with. And here you are navigating one of the most important events in life. Your parent is terminal. And suddenly, unexpectedly, in the context of your marriage, you can feel alone. So I just really want to say that's normal. And I also want to speak to the experience of the spouse, the supportive spouse. Now, I have not gone through this personally. I am thrilled to say that my husband's parents are young, healthy, and none of what I'm talking about is relevant at all. In fact, if they listen, if I were to even refer to it, it would probably be offensive. So I just want to say that I love that that's true, and I'm not speaking from experience. But I have seen this many times in other people. And the person who is in the supportive spouse role, really, it's challenging too, because it's hard to know how to be supportive in this kind of context. And what works in other contexts doesn't really work with something like this, which is so severe. And I think it's really important for the person whose parent is terminal to have compassion and not take the supportive spouse's inability to meet you in that painful place in your heart. That's not personal. That doesn't mean he or she doesn't care. It just means that you're in a different process than the supportive spouse is in. So, what is the supportive spouse experiencing? Well, in addition to the loss of an in-law, their spouse is not really present in the marriage when their internal world is turned upside down in this way. And that's its own kind of loneliness also. And for the supportive spouse, the more likely scenario is to dive into hobbies, socialize more. In other words, look for things that will fill him or her up, because that intimate connection with the spouse isn't available during this time. So it's important not to compare, but nobody has the right to say their experience is more important in terms of the impact on the marriage. So I do want to emphasize that and really inspire you to have more compassion on your own experience and your spouse's, should this be relevant in your life. All right, so I want to give you some guidelines. I've wanted to describe how this can be, largely to normalize it. And it's helpful to hear other people's experiences as you have your own. And I want to give you some guidelines so that this can go well rather than not. Now, this is in the context of a parent being terminal, and your relationship with your parent and your parent dying or your in-law dying, that that can be heartbreaking. That is a whole thing that needs attention unto itself, and I acknowledge that with compassion. And in this episode, I'm actually not focusing on that. I'm focusing very directly and explicitly on the impact on your marriage and how you navigate that when that is the thing that is most important, or in any case, also important. So, my first guideline for you is if you and your spouse have 4 healthy parents, and any number of step parents, I suppose. But the point is, you haven't gone through the kind of experience that I'm talking about. Or maybe when you met, all of the parents weren't still alive. Like, there are a lot of ways that this can play out. But in any case, if you haven't together gone through this kind of a loss, I highly recommend that you have a conversation about it. You can never anticipate how it's actually going to play out. You don't know how long the illness is going to be. You don't know what the illness is. You like there just are an infinite number of variables that you cannot know in advance, including how it's going to impact each of you and your relationship. But to just have a conversation about it and open up the dialogue and consider what needs you might have or not have, that actually can be very helpful, because that way, when you have the first conversation, when it's actually relevant, it's not the first conversation on the topic. And you can have this conversation in advance with all of your attention on yourselves and one another. But as soon as it becomes relevant, you're going to have your attention on a whole bunch of other things. And so it can be really helpful to have just floated the idea the same way you might, if retirement is way a ways in the distance, you might enjoy talking about what you're going to do when you retire. Or if you were given $500,000, how would you want to spend it? And similarly, if your mother becomes ill and we find out she has 6 months to live, what would we want to do ourselves together with our family? What what do you think would come up in that situation? This is not about being morose or somber. This is about setting things up so you're not blindsided by realities, which will eventually happen. Okay, if this is already happening, then I really think the number one thing is compassion and acceptance. And then, based on what you desire, some amount of connection. So let me be more specific. I'm thinking of my operations manager I referred to earlier, who was saying that whenever she's awake, she's thinking about her father. She's doing incredible work for me. She's interacting and having conversations with her husband. She's walking the dog. She's doing all the things. And she is always thinking about her father. Whereas her husband is not. He's thinking about her father sometimes. He's really sorry that he's terminal. But he also is putting it out of his mind, compartmentalizing and enjoying whatever is happening in the present moment. So one of the things to think about when this is happening, in order to understand and have compassion, is that for the supportive spouse, this is a loss. It's a very real, significant loss. But he will be the same before it happens and after it happens. Yes, he will no longer have a father-in-law who's alive, but he will be the same person before and after. Whereas for my friend, that's actually not true. When her father passes, as she anticipates it happening, and once it does, her identity is changing. She is going from being the daughter of a father that she can call anytime, who is there for her, who is available for conversation. She gets to be his little girl, even though she's this wonderful, grown up, mature adult. All of that is currently available and will be shifting, and she knows it's happening. I'm actually reminded of when my mother died. It was actually maybe 2 weeks before she died. She said to me, "Oh, I can see I've already passed the matriarchal cloak on to you." Like there was a shift in the responsibility and the power dynamic where I was really taking care of her, and she was no longer the maternal figure. I became the maternal figure. It was an amazing moment when she said that, because I knew it was true, even though I also didn't want it to be, because I wasn't ready to let go of her as my maternal figure. But anyway, it happened. We're not always so aware and conscious of it happening in advance of the passing. And one of the reasons that it did is because my mother died at home. We weren't in the hospital, which is disempowering, though helpful. It's fundamentally hierarchical and disempowering for both patient and family member. But in any case, it is an identity shift when your parent is terminal and going to pass, and an identity shift, becoming a different person as a result of not having a parent alive, is just a totally different journey and a kind of reconstructing from the inside out. It's just not like the kind of loss that a supportive spouse goes through, unless perhaps they relate as a son to the in-law, but even then, it's not quite as intense. So being aware of that is super important. And it's appropriate not to want your spouse to join you in an identity shift, because that's artificial. That's not their circumstance. This is yours to navigate. And it's also not appropriate for the supportive spouse to say, "Hey, let's just go out and have some fun. Just, let's go have some drinks and forget about your father for a little while." Don't say that. That's not where she is. And if you say it, it's like an emotional dagger to the heart, because it leaves the person just feeling so unseen. And I think one of the most painful elements in terms of the marital context is how unseen we feel in this kind of a moment. Now, shifting away from this particular couple that I've been talking about, when we have this kind of situation on our mind front and center all the time, it's not just that we don't have access to like go have fun and laugh hysterically or let it rip during karaoke. It also impacts sensual sexual intimacy, because it's just not very erotic for me. I'll just use the first person to be clear. For me to be thinking about my father while we're starting to be more sexy and passionate. It just dehydrates all those juices. It's like the lube doesn't work when I am oriented to my parent being terminal. So, first of all, it's super important, again, to be compassionate. You might listen to, actually, there's a I did a presentation on YouTube about how to stay present during sex, and a lot of that would be very useful. I'll link to that in the show notes because that would be helpful to aim for when you're wanting to have sex during this phase of life. And also, I highly recommend non-sexual touch. In other words, if you're the supportive spouse and you want to be having sex and your partner is internally filled with concern for her dying parent, there's just not a lot of erotic sparks available, at least not right at the outset. But in that situation, I highly recommend non-sexual physical touch. So maybe you get into bed together naked and you, the supportive spouse, massage your partner's back. Like, what's most important is that you're not asking the grieving spouse to give to you or provide to you. Because one of the things about being in this situation is that it is profoundly fatiguing. And even if someone manages to do all of their work responsibilities and put together sentences that are intelligent and make sense, a spouse in this situation is in survival mode. And any extra decisions are a burden. Figuring out what to cook for dinner it takes much more energy and is much more challenging than when you're not in a situation like this. So don't ask, what time do you want to have dinner? Or what do you want to have for dinner? Or who should cook dinner? Or any of these basic questions. I mean, there may be a context in which you want to ask if you really don't know the answer and can't figure it out for yourself. But do your best to figure it out, because one of the ways that you can be most supportive is to take care of the practical things and to be available to nourish and nurture through non-sexual physical touch, through just bringing a bowl of soup and saying, go ahead and have something to eat, through running a bath, through these very basic things that you might look at your spouse and think, he or she doesn't need that from me. Well, when a beloved parent is in a terminal stage of an illness, they may need it more than they have any idea how to ask for. So spare them the job of figuring it out and just provide it. And by the way, that's true when your spouse is super stressed and in survival mode for any cause. So what I really want to leave you with is an invitation to a conversation in your own mind and also with your spouse about how you want to navigate and orient when one of you is going through something so deep and the other one actually isn't, even though it's the sort of thing that you would go through together. Quite frankly, what I'm saying is not fundamentally that different when both of you have successful careers and one of you continues to, and the other one is fired and feels aimless and obsessed with figuring it out and depressed and not able to enjoy things in life so much anymore. I'm sharing that because that may make what I've spoken about more relevant or more relatable for some of you. I am not fool enough to pretend to have easy answers, quick fixes, or an amazing reframe to make this time really juicy and delicious. Inherently, it's not, and it is essential for you to be able to feel whatever you feel in the way of grief, loss, hopelessness, helplessness, sorrow, loneliness, frustration, etc. And the one additional thing that I would say is do your best not to shut one another out. Notice I'm not saying do your best to share with one another, because sometimes speaking about your experience really isn't helpful during this phase. But maybe the supportive spouse can say, just look at you and say, I know it's hard and I love you. And that's probably enough conversation. And if the spouse whose parent is terminal has big emotional waves, just be there. Don't try to fix it. This is not one of those times when you can fix it. But just being there, I got you. I know this is hard. I love you, is probably your very best contribution. So if this is something that you've experienced and you have additional tips I haven't mentioned, please reach out. You can go to my website, alexandrastockwell.com/contact, and send me a message, or find me on any social media platform. Well, except Facebook, because my account was closed down. I am trying to bring it back. But anyway, if you don't find me there, look for me on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, LinkedIn. Because if this is something you've navigated, I would love to hear your story. I would love to hear any tips you have. And if this is something you're currently going through, I give you all my best and really hope that this has served you, and at a minimum, encourage you to just forward this to your spouse and let them listen in order to relate more effectively to what you are currently navigating. And just know, whatever sorrow it is, it's not forever. You should both know that. Libido will return, intimacy will blossom, but everything has a season. And when you're grieving your parent, anticipating a passing, it's just not the right time to be expanding into intimacy, and just don't let that mean anything except that it's coming in the future. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend, and please leave a rating and a review. And if you're ready to deepen your relationship and create a truly intimate, delicious, and vibrant marriage, head over to the Work With Me page at alexandrastockwell.com and choose the program that's right for you.